the 80s, this is what they thought 2015 would look like.
There's a moment tucked inside one of the most beloved films ever made, a moment so strange that once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. It's not a special effect gone wrong. It's not a stunt that almost failed. It's a simple continuity slip that somehow made it past every editor, every producer, and every test screening, and it has been sitting in plain sight for 4 decades. We're talking about Back to the Future, and the blooper hiding inside its most pivotal scene. Before we get to the mistake itself, it helps to understand just how chaotic the road to making this film actually was. The idea began with 2 young filmmakers, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who were kicking around a simple question during a car ride. What would it be like to meet your own parents back when they were teenagers? That question turned into a screenplay, and that screenplay turned into years of frustration. Studio after studio rejected the script. Some executives thought the concept was too soft, too innocent, too tame for a decade obsessed with raunchy teen comedies. Zemeckis has said in interviews over the years that he lost count of how many times the project was turned down, and at one point he genuinely believed it would never get made. The tide turned only after Zemeckis proved himself with a box office hit, and once a studio finally agreed to back the film, a new set of problems appeared almost immediately. The role of Marty McFly was always meant for Michael J. Fox, but Fox was tied up filming his sitcom, and the producers of that show wouldn't let him go. So production started with a different actor in the lead role. Weeks of footage were shot before the filmmakers realized the tone simply wasn't landing the way they needed it to. The decision to replace him mid-shoot cost time and money that a smaller production could never have absorbed, but it turned out to be the right call, because once Fox stepped into the role, the character clicked into place. With the release date locked in for the summer of 1985, the crew were racing against the clock. Editing, sound design, and effects work were all being finished at a breakneck pace, and that time pressure is exactly the kind of environment where small mistakes slip through unnoticed. Nobody had the luxury of watching every frame back a dozen times looking for continuity errors. They were simply trying to get a finished film into theaters, and by most accounts they barely made it. When the movie finally opened, it became an unstoppable cultural phenomenon. It topped the box office charts for the entire year. It turned a modified sports car into one of the most recognizable vehicles in movie history, and it turned a fairly simple time travel premise into something audiences of every age could connect with. Decades later, it was inducted into the National Film Registry for its cultural significance, an honor reserved for films the Library of Congress considers essential to American history. And yet, for all its polish and all its acclaim, the film still contains a mistake that has nothing to do with special effects and everything to do with basic physical logic. Here's the scene in question. Early in the film, Marty is standing in 1985 filming a video message on a camcorder, capturing footage of Doc Brown as he explains his plans for the DeLorean. Later, once Marty is stranded in 1955, he uses that same recorded tape to convince the younger version of Doc Brown that he really is from the future. He plays back the footage, and in it, Doc Brown can clearly be seen and heard delivering a line before the tape cuts off abruptly, something to the effect of waving off further questions with an offhand remark. The issue is a matter of simple camera positioning. If you go back and watch the earlier scene where Marty is actually recording that footage, the camcorder is not held up to his eye and pointed steadily at Doc Brown the entire time. There's a stretch where Marty lowers the camera to his side, letting it hang loosely as he continues talking. During that stretch, the lens is pointed at the ground or off to the side, nowhere near Doc Brown's face. Yet when that exact same recording gets played back later in the story, it shows Doc Brown clearly framed and audible delivering his line, footage that logically should never have existed given where the camera was actually pointed moments earlier. It's the kind of mistake that almost nobody catches on a first viewing, because the emotional weight of the scene carries you right past it. You're focused on watching young Doc Brown's mind get blown by proof from the future, not scrutinizing camera angles from an earlier scene. But once someone points it out, you start rewinding both moments side by side, and the mismatch becomes impossible to unsee. It's become something of a favorite among people who catalog film mistakes, not because it ruins the movie, but because it's proof that even a film revered as nearly perfect had a crew working under real-world pressure, making real-world oversights. And this isn't the only inconsistency lurking in the background of the trilogy. Take the flyer that reads "Save the Clock Tower," the piece of paper Marty carries around for most of the movie after a local activist hands it to him on the street. Jennifer later writes a personal note on the back of that same flyer as a keepsake for Marty. If you track that prop across different scenes, its condition changes in ways that don't quite line up with the timeline of the story. Sometimes it looks freshly printed and crisp. In other shots, it looks like it's been folded and carried around for hours. There's even a moment where sharp-eyed viewers have pointed out that Jennifer's handwriting appears to already be on the back of the flyer before the scene where she supposedly writes it. Then there's the wandering extra, a background performer who shows up walking past the same spot in the town square scene more than once, moving in the same direction each time, as if he looped back around for an encore appearance nobody intended. In a movie about a time machine, fans have joked that this repeating extra feels almost like a wink at the film's own subject matter, even though it was clearly just a scheduling and blocking oversight during a busy day of shooting extras on a crowded set. Small physical props cause their own share of headaches too. When Doc Brown handles the plutonium that powers the time machine, it's depicted in the film as a glowing liquid inside a sealed container, when in reality plutonium is a solid metal with a dull silvery appearance. That was clearly a deliberate choice for visual drama rather than a continuity mistake, but it's worth mentioning because so many viewers over the years have assumed it was meant to be scientifically accurate when the filmmakers were really just trying to make something look appropriately dangerous and glowing on camera. None of these things take away from why the film has endured. If anything, they add a layer of humanity to a production that could easily be mistaken for flawless. Every one of these details is proof that dozens of people were working long hours under real financial pressure, trying to hit an immovable release date, and that occasionally something as simple as a camera angle from an earlier scene gets forgotten by the time editors are cutting together a payoff scene weeks or months later. Casting decisions almost took the entire trilogy in a wildly different direction too. Christopher Lloyd is so associated with the eccentric, wild-haired scientist that it's hard to picture anyone else in the role, but he wasn't the only actor considered. Other performers known for offbeat, high-energy performances were floated for the part during early casting discussions, and it's fascinating to imagine how different the chemistry between Doc and Marty might have felt with a different actor delivering those manic bursts of scientific excitement. The sequels themselves went through their own transformations before landing on the versions we know today. Early planning for the second film reportedly explored an entirely different destination for the time machine, something rooted in the counterculture of an earlier decade rather than the neon-soaked future audiences eventually got. The filmmakers ultimately decided that revisiting the events of the original film from a new angle, while also giving audiences that flashy vision of a future filled with hoverboards and flying cars, made for a stronger and more surprising sequel than the path they had originally been circling. Behind the scenes, cast members were also pushing themselves physically in ways that audiences rarely appreciated at the time. Michael J. Fox trained extensively to make Marty's skateboarding, guitar playing, and general athleticism look effortless on camera. He worked with music instructors to learn guitar parts note for note, even though the audio had already been recorded, simply so that his hand movements would sync convincingly with the sound. He also studied classic rock performance style to nail the physicality of the iconic guitar solo performed at the school dance, treating what could have been a throwaway musical cue as something worth genuinely mastering. By the time filming wrapped on the third installment, he'd also trained in horseback riding and stage gunplay for the Old West setting, learning an entirely new set of physical skills for a single film. Some of that physical commitment came with real danger attached. During production of the third film, a hanging stunt intended to look tense on screen ended up becoming genuinely dangerous when the rope restricted his breathing longer than planned, leaving him briefly unconscious before the crew caught the problem and got him down safely. It's a sobering reminder that behind-the-scene design to make an audience gasp, there was a real person whose safety depended entirely on split-second timing from the people around him. There were emotional risks taken on screen too. Christopher Lloyd's character experienced a tender romantic subplot in the third film that gave him his first ever on-screen kiss in his career up to that point, a moment that required him to soften a character who had spent 2 films being defined mostly by frantic energy and wild-eyed enthusiasm. It's a small but meaningful shift, one that added unexpected depth to a character who could have easily stayed a one-note comic figure through the entire trilogy. Not every disagreement behind the scenes stayed calm either. There are accounts of heated arguments between cast and crew over small creative details, disagreements passionate enough that other actors would retreat to their trailers just to stay out of the crossfire. That kind of friction rarely makes it into the finished film, but it's part of what makes the production history so interesting. A movie remembered today as pure, breezy entertainment was actually built through genuine tension, disagreement, and compromise among people who cared deeply about getting every detail right. Even the film's political world afterlife adds another strange layer to its legacy. A sitting American president at the time was reportedly such a fan of the film that he referenced one of its most memorable lines during a major national address, turning a joke from a time-traveling science fiction script into a genuine piece of political rhetoric. It's a strange kind of full-circle moment, considering the film itself contains a joke about how absurd it would be for a former actor to become president in the first place, a joke that landed because of exactly who was in office by the time the film reached theaters. All of this adds up to a portrait of a film that looks effortless on screen, but was anything but effortless to make. A rushed production schedule, a recast lead role, physical stunts that occasionally went wrong, genuine on-set arguments, and a release date that left almost no room for error, and yet what audiences got was one of the most beloved and rewatched films in American cinema. The videotape blooper, where a scene shows footage that logically couldn't exist given where the camera was actually pointed moments earlier, is really just one small symptom of a much bigger story. Real people, working incredibly hard, under real pressure, making something that still holds up decades later despite its imperfections. That's exactly why fans keep going back to hunt for these details in the first place. Spotting a continuity error in a movie this famous feels like being let in on a secret, like you've noticed something that slipped past thousands of hours of editing and years of test screenings. It doesn't diminish the film. If anything, it makes it feel more alive, more human, more like the product of real people scrambling to hit a deadline, rather than some flawless, machine-produced piece of entertainment. Every rewatch becomes an opportunity to catch something new, whether it's the mismatched camcorder footage, the shifting condition of a paper flyer, or a background extra who seems to be stuck in his own personal time loop. So the next time you sit down to watch Marty McFly race against the clock to get back to his own time, keep an eye on that camcorder scene. Watch where it's actually pointed when Doc Brown starts talking, and then watch the payoff scene later in the film where that same footage gets played back. Once you see the mismatch, you won't be able to unsee it, and you'll understand exactly why this particular blooper has become one of the most talked about mistakes in movie history, hiding in plain sight inside one of the most rewatched films ever made. What other details have you noticed hiding in this trilogy that most people miss on a first watch? There's a good chance the answer is sitting in the comments below, waiting for someone else to go back and check for themselves.